This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. Is there something interfering with your happiness or is preventing you from achieving your goals?
Usually, yes.
Well, BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist.
Yeah, you can start communicating in under 48 hours. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional counseling done securely online.
Yeah, a friend of mine's doing it. She said she reached out to them and they got back with her right away.
Yeah, I think it's great. You get to avoid the uncomfortable waiting rooms. You can do it from anywhere in the world, and there's all kinds of counselors to choose from.
Yeah, you'll get timely and thoughtful responses. Plus, you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions, so you won't ever have to sit in an uncomfortable waiting room like you said.
There you go. And it's more affordable than traditional offline counseling, and financial aid is available, which is very cool.
Oh, sweet. BetterHelp wants you to start living a happier life today, so visit their website and use our promo code.
And what is that promo code?
MIF. That stands for Music is Funny.
Yes. So if you use our code, it gets you 10% off the first month.
Yeah, go to www.betterhelp.com/MIF.
And that's BetterHelp, HELP.
.com/myth. This podcast is also sponsored by Pure Spectrum CBD.
Yeah, CBD is a big thing right now. I mean, they sell it in gas stations. You can buy it, anywhere. And it's kind of an unregulated industry.
Yeah, I had a weird experience where I got some Delta 8 gummies and it was such a trip. It was not safe.
Right. If you go to Pure Spectrum CBD, you can trust these guys. They're from Colorado. They've been doing this for a long time. Everything's tested. They come from, I think it's a family farm in Colorado. So, CBD is great. It's great for aches and pains, all kinds of stuff.
Anxiety.
Yeah. And if you get it from Pure Spectrum CBD, you're not going to fail a drug test. You're not going to get high. It is pure CBD, just the medicinal qualities, and you can trust that.
Yeah, CBD is one cannabinoid away from THC, but it's not the psychoactive cannabinoid. So it's just all the healing properties of cannabis without getting high.
That part's kind of a bummer. But for those that don't want to get high, these guys are the one to go to get all of your CBD products. You can trust them. They've been around forever. And you can save some money with our promo code
MIF10. So go to purespectrum.com/MIF10 to get 10% off all your orders.
And that's MIF, MIF 10. Stands for Music is Funny, but it's shorthand. So anyway, check out Pure Spectrum CBD. And now, on to the show.
I was afraid of punk rock and heavy metal because I thought it would make me worship the devil.
Live from the Willie Nelson and Friends Museum Showcase in Nashville, Tennessee, it's Music is Funny. Musicians talking to comedians about music and comedy. With your hosts, Raylan Nelson and Jonathan Bright.
So smoking, I'm so high, I keep toking, I'm drunk, but I'm still drinking too.
Welcome back to Music is Funny. I'm Raylan Nelson.
And I'm Jonathan Bright from the Raylan Nelson Band. We're back with one of those ridiculous and unnecessary intros.
Steve Simeone. Sorry about that time zone thing. Like I said, I'm a grown adult and I can't figure time zones out still.
That was me too. I was like, wait, it's in 40-minute, half hour. And then I read the thing and I'm like, 4:00 my time. Okay. I have time to walk around the lake. And then you were like, we're ready to go. And I'm like, let me get home right now. I'm so sorry.
Well, ironically, I think we went through the same thing with Todd Glass last week when we were setting it up.
Yeah, Todd Glass doesn't know how to do time zones either. So,
we're in good company.
Yeah, I know how to do like from the East Coast to LA, but then in the middle, it's like algebra. I'm not smart enough to figure it out. I'm like, I don't know what's happening here. Just tell me when to be there and I'll try my best.
You're like, just text me right before so I know. And
I have my computer with me and my phone. I'm like, worst case scenario, we'll do it at the lake. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. I haven't, I don't know about the parts of Florida that is in a different time zone. Where are you?
I'm figuring that out myself. I don't even know how I got here, but it's definitely a blessing. That's kind of like my philosophy on life. I don't know how I got here.
You just moved there, right?
Yeah. And it wasn't like a planned move. It wasn't like, this is what I'm going to do with my life. It was just like a response to what was happening in LA at the time. And I knew I didn't love it there. So
yeah.
Why Florida?
My parents retired here.
Oh,
and it was all because it was going to be my mom's birthday and my brother's this was like almost a year ago, and my brothers have kids, and they were taking the COVID thing way more serious than me.
Right.
Like I wasn't smart enough to be afraid. And I was like, well, mom's not going to spend her birthday by herself. And then all my friends were leaving LA. And I remember like watching a Joe Rogan podcast, and he was saying like how he was getting out of LA. And I'm like, well, he's way smarter than I am. And then my best friend is like, one of my best friends is Joey Diaz. And like, we didn't live too far away from each other in LA. And like, we had that sense of community during the lockdown, like where we would feed each other. Like I would make something to eat and I'd bring it over to Joey's house. And then like the next day I'd be like, dog, get over here. I got some clams I want you to cook. Cause like, and then he started to buy the food and tell me what he wanted me to do with it. And then when he was saying he was getting out of LA and he was taking it straight from like a street perspective, like, cause of his history. And he was like, dog, these streets are talking. I saw a man bleeding profusely in broad daylight. It's time to get out. And I had so I figured I'd get out of LA for like a month or two until it opened up, and it never opened up. And then I just wanted to spend more time with my parents. So I bought a house and moved them in. It's the best.
Unless you're doing TV shows, we talked about it with a bunch of people, you don't really, I guess, need to be anywhere to do comedy.
No, and I'm in between two airports, which is
yeah, and that's why a lot of people are moving to Texas and moving here, is because you're kind of right in the middle, so you don't start the tour with some massive flight or drive.
Exactly. And like Texas is just, it's wonderful. Like the people, the food. I really dig Texas. That was the first place I ever did comedy on the road, ever.
Oh.
I opened up for Pauly Shore. And we flew into Houston. And I remember it vividly. It was almost 20 years ago. And there was a stretch limousine pickup truck. And I'm like, this is the most Texas thing I've ever seen. And I don't know. I guess maybe because it was the first place I ever did stand up. I don't know why. I just always loved it. And I had a roommate from Texas. I dated a girl for many years that was as Texas as it gets.
Yeah.
She was awesome. And like, she knew so much about Texas.
Right.
Like she knew more about Texas than I knew about pro wrestling. Like one of her relatives was at the Alamo. Like she was as Texas as it gets.
True.
Yeah, dude, Texas is awesome.
Yeah. Texans love Texas.
It's like people from Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
They love Pittsburgh, and people in Texas love Texas. Well, we need to back up.
I know. Listen, hey, this is my guitar player and buddy, JB, the guy I do the podcast. This is Steve. He's my friend.
Nice to meet you, Steve.
And of course, I'm Raylyn. And we have to ask you.
Oh, yeah. We always start with music because we don't really want to talk about much about music, but we get it out of the way early.
Yeah.
What kind of music fan are you? Did you start young? Did you have a cool parents, record collection, older brothers?
Okay. How can I? Music was always a part of my house growing up.
Okay. What did your mom and dad like?
My dad, I grew up in suburban Philadelphia.
Okay.
And my dad was like best buddies with a recording artist named Jim Croce.
Oh, yeah.
Killed in the 70s. And so I remember Jimmy's music being played in our house all the time. Oh. And we're also Italian American from suburban Philadelphia. So Sundays were always Sinatra.
Right.
Like I equate Sundays with Frank Sinatra and the smell of meatballs. Like to me, that's just what joy is. Sinatra is the soundtrack to joy. And then as like, you become a kid and you want to sort of like be cool.
Oh, yeah.
And my generation, music was the passport to cool. And my older brother, he's 3 years older than me, and he played guitar, and he was a huge Van Halen fan.
Yeah.
And like that sort of genre of music. But then when I started to get older and I wanted my own identity, I was the perfect age for the birth of hip hop.
Oh, yeah. Me too.
Oh, yeah. Like, and I really feel so blessed because I was like last generation rock and roll, first generation hip hop. And I remember being at keg parties in high school and you would hear like Guns N' Roses followed by Public Enemy. And I'm like, this was great.
I was kind of the same way with punk rock too. They kind of
Oh yeah, I was a skateboarder, but this is what happened. Part of the reason why I chose to get into hip hop is because I was afraid. I was afraid of punk rock and heavy metal because I thought it would make me worship the devil. So let me just listen to Run DMC and know,
right. So
I'm going to not make Jesus cry.
When you say the birth of hip hop, though, you're talking about like KRS-One and the Fat Boys and UTFO, all that kind of stuff. Dougie Fresh.
Yeah, where it wasn't played, like even in Philly, they would play rap music once a week with this lady. Her name was Lady B, and she'd play music late Friday nights. It would start at like 10 o'clock on Friday nights. And I would take a blank cassette. This is how old I am. And I would put it in my boombox and just record the show because I couldn't stay awake late enough to hear it all. And I'd wake up on Saturday morning. Did you really?
Yeah, we had a college radio station here in town that there was always one student who would get an hour, and he would have all the obscure shit. And when it was coming out, you remember, it was kind of like punk rock or anything, I guess. Every new group that came out sounded completely different than the other one. They had their own take on it because there was so few of them at the time. Like you mentioned Public Enemy. That was the first time I was like, okay, they've discovered punk rock in rap because they're not worried about verses or choruses. They're just beating you over the head with it. Loved it. But, it started off with the sort of song form, maybe sing a chorus and then start rapping. And then the whole B-boy thing came. It was just fun to watch it sprout like that.
For sure. And the cool thing about music is there's always something new to discover. Right? Like I got sick of everything I listened to. And then I don't know, maybe it was because I dated a girl from Texas or I don't know if I was sick of everything I listened to or I was just growing as a person. Mm-hmm. And I know like as a comedian, I was a storyteller. So I started to get into like more old school country guys that were just telling stories with their songs. And I'm like, whoa, this is dope. And then I started to listen to more country, and now it's like I'm a huge Bocelli fan. Like that's what I listen to. I'm like, because I just feel his emotion in a song, and next thing you know, I'm crying on a treadmill, and everybody's asking me if I'm okay. I'm like, no, good, I'm good, dude. Just feel Bocelli.
I know this is a little early to ask you this, but when's the first time you remember hearing a Papa Willie song or about Willie Nelson? Mm-hmm. Do you know who my grandpa is?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I remember the first time I really figured out who Willie Nelson was when I was staying awake late with my parents and seeing him as an actor in a movie with James Caan. I believe it was called Thief. And I'm like, who is this dude? Like, he just had a presence. I thought he was an actor. And then around that time, I think that song, it's like early 80s. And it was Mama, Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Cowboys. Yeah. And I was a little baby kid. I'm like, why not be a cowboy? It's like the coolest thing ever. Like as like a 6-year-old kid, I thought that was a real job. I'm like, well, I could be a cowboy. I could be a fireman. You know what I mean? And I was like, why is he telling people not to be cowboys? They seem awesome. You get to shoot guns and ride horses.
Yeah.
And that's cool. I don't know. Like, I think there's nobody more American than Willie Nelson. Like nobody as like 100% themselves. Mm-hmm. That's why I love this country.
He's so honest. He's so honest and loyal, and it's so cool because his fans are split right down the middle politically.
Huh?
And it's the coolest thing. He can just reach
more American than that. Like I think that's exactly what we need. We need to come together, man. Like all this divide and conquer stuff, it's played out enough. Let's just be loving, and kind, and just listen.
And haven't we evolved past that? That you would think by this time, like it's just.
You would think.
It does kind of feel like there's a bit of an awakening coming around, though. I think people are looking to the leaders and like, okay, I really can't throw my whole weight behind anybody up there.
100% so.
They're going to make you look stupid eventually. If you jump behind one of them, you're going to look like a douchebag eventually because they're going to do something. It's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, and it's like, why? Like, our leaders are so bad. It's like, I don't even pay attention to them. I'm like, who's this person in front of me? Who is this soul I'm interacting with?
Exactly.
And how can I be loving and present to this person right now in this moment? And it's a way better way to go through life.
For sure.
Yeah.
So let's figure out, how did you get started in comedy?
Yeah, I'm
Were
really
you around a
interested in your
humorous
story.
family, big family? Were you the funny
Oh yeah, I'm the middle of 3 boys, so my
there's
house
ball
growing up.
busting going on all the time?
Yeah, it was the great, like it was the best. Like I didn't realize how blessed I was until I became a grown up. I thought everybody grew up fun, and it didn't. Like growing up with brothers, like it was better than TV. It was better than like there was always like BB guns and fireworks and BMX ramps and skateboards and adventure and fights and laughter.
And secrets. Don't tell mom. A lot of
Hit me back. Hit me right now. You hit me as hard as you want. I'll even let you go for the face. Just don't tell mom. Like the best. I think that teaches you to be a good person, because like I used to do a joke about that. Like we need more families, because a family will teach you love and forgiveness. Because legitimately in my house growing up, a legitimate felony was committed every single day. Every day. Like if I treated somebody as poorly as I treated like if I were to go into society right now, like turn off my computer, walk into a bar and treat a stranger as poorly as I treated my brothers, I would go to jail.
Yeah.
Like that happened every day. Assault, battery, larceny, arson, attempted murder. That happened every day in my house. So you have to learn how to forgive each other, you know?
Yeah.
and how to survive too.
Yeah.
I have twin boys that are 14 years old.
Oh my gosh. Glory days. That's such an awesome, awkward, wonderful age.
Yeah, and I have a daughter who's 11, and I feel like every single day, at least in the past 3 or 4 weeks, we have got to figure out how to live together without fighting every day. You know, because they're just constantly tones, and no, I don't see the hitting and stuff. I'm sure that's going on. They would do that in front of me.
And I'm sure they can come up with some tones because, I mean, you are their mother.
Yeah. But you know, I can picture them. Can you picture the boys doing that? Like, please hit me as hard as you want. Just don't go tell mama.
Oh, totally. And I can picture
I can
you
relate.
screaming at them, and then like behind the doors, kind of rolling their eye, goes, "Oh, here goes mom.
Here
She's
goes
going
mom's
crazy.
going crazy again.
Because
Are
I
you
was
on
the
your period, mom? That's usually what it is. Are you on your period? Anyway.
Yeah, but I was a 14-year-old boy once. I could totally get that. So big family, your brothers. How did you get into comedy? Did you start young? About what time were you a comedy fan? Like, did you grow up watching comedians and all that?
100% so. Like, I would say humor was like the love language of our house.
Yeah.
You know, like every sort of family in my neighborhood had their own vibe. You know, there was like the family where like all the kids were athletes. And then there was like the family where the kids were all like nerdy and really smart. Everybody in my family is funny, you know, and we had an appreciation for comedy. Like you asked about my dad's record collection. My dad also had comedy albums. I remember like going through and finding like deep cuts, like guys like Pat Cooper. I'm like, Who's this dude? And my dad was like the best audience. Like he would laugh every night at the dinner table. And it was kind of like a comedy, like my older brother, the funniest dude ever. He was just naturally funny. So then like I would just have to be like a little more physical and a little louder to get attention away from my older brother.
Yeah.
And then my younger brother was like, I'm not going to compete with those two idiots. I'm just going to sit back and level the table with a word. Like my older brother is like a skinny 6-year-old kid, and I'd be like lying for attention and making fun of people. My older brother would just look at me and go, really? And just the way he would say, really, everybody would laugh because they knew I was being an idiot. So it was fun. And I grew up in like a golden era of comedy. Like I remember the birth of cable television and HBO. Like you would see Carlin, Eddie Murphy, these guys would have specials. And my family would get together and watch those things like the Super Bowl. Like we would watch comedy and celebrate it. And then Comedy Central blew up. I was there.
The Dangerfield specials, I'm sure, because that's my intro to a lot of Bill Hicks, Dice, all those guys.
Yes. 100. I remember those vividly. I remember Rodney's introduction to Bill Hicks. It's got to be like 30, 40 years ago. He was like, this guy's so ahead of his time. His parents haven't even met yet. Give it up for Bill Hicks. I remember that. I remember Dice coming out smoking his. I remember Sam Kinison
Yep.
coming out and just murdering in 7 minutes. I remember it was like Dice and Kinnison were the guys everybody talked about Monday at school. Like, did you see that guy on Rodney Dangerfield's special? It was crazy. It was a great time to be exposed to humor.
You ended up being buddies with Dice, right?
Yeah.
That's got to be weird. Well, let's
did
get
that
to that.
happen?
Now let's get there. When did you actually do your first stand-up gig?
In Texas, you said?
That was the first time I was on the road.
Okay.
The first ever
That
gig.
was years after open mics.
Gotcha.
I did an open mic in Baltimore right after college, but it was like the late 90s and comedy was dead.
I was just about to say it wasn't exactly just booming the time you were coming in.
No, and there weren't a lot of opportunities to perform. Like, I grew up thinking comedy was the best, but I didn't realize that it was like a very cyclical business. And I tried to get on stage wherever I could, but I never thought I would do it for a living. Like, I thought you had to be born special. Like, somebody had to give you permission to do it. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It does.
Well, there might be a little to it saying you need to be born special, because I don't think just anybody can hard work their way into being a successful comedian. So
Yeah.
you were touched with it. Just got lucky that you like to do it, I guess, or were touched with whatever you needed to be touched with.
Yeah, I agree.
I think there's a distinction between being funny and a successful comedian. And I think you have to be crazy not to give up. Like, I look back at the struggles I've had over the last 20 plus years, and I'm like, oh, I have to be a crazy person not to have given up.
Yeah,
Like,
same with music too.
We talk about that all the time.
Right.
Like, how have I not been able to chew my leg out of the trap at this point?
Yes. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. And I think that's a different skill set or lack of skill set than being funny.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, and I know my life just got to a point where I was so sort of miserable with being a grown up. Like, I couldn't do corporate America. I did everything they told me I should do, right? Like, get good grades, go to college. And in the back of my brain was always comedy. And I couldn't, I don't know. I was just so miserable that essentially one day I just got in my car and drove to California with nothing. I mean, it was insane.
So why California and not New York? Because they're both comedy hotspots.
And you're
Is it-
close to New York at the time, right? You were closer there.
That's why I didn't go.
Let's see.
Okay.
I knew if I went to New York, I would have quit.
Too easy to go back.
Too easy to go back. I
Mm.
could have, taken a train and been home in an hour and a half.
Well, and then there's the
Um,
weather.
Like,
The weather in California.
it was the weather,
The girls.
beautiful. Yeah, everything in California. Plus, like growing up in the 80s, they made California look awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Like Fast Times at Ridgemont High, the whole surfers, skateboard. I'm like, everything cool's in California. And then I got there. I'm like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. This is horrible.
To be
So-
fair, because I know you worked a bunch and we should get into it at the Comedy Store, but when you showed up there, it was the same non-boom that was happening in Philly. It wasn't what people think of the Comedy Store as it is.
Oh, it was okay. When I showed up at the Comedy Store, God rest her soul, Mitzi Shore was still running the place.
Right.
And she had a rule that we couldn't start. When I first got there, we couldn't start a show without 6 audience members. And then it became 4 audience members. And then it became 2. And I remember there were nights, it wasn't often, but there were nights like on Tuesdays or Wednesdays where we didn't have 2 people to start a show.
That's crazy to think
That's
of now.
so weird.
Mm-hmm.
So you've done some performing like we have in bands, if you grow up doing it enough, crowds of 2 and 3 people.
Yeah.
It's good
Yeah.
for the soul if you can hang in there,
Have you ever played for nobody or have you ever done a show for no one?
I remember like early open mics at the Comedy Store. It was such a disaster. Like, you would have to sign up on a list
Yeah.
on Saturday night when I first got there. It just makes no sense at all. Like, the only night that the club was doing any business was Saturday nights. So they're like, oh, here's a good way to scare away customers. Let's let all the open mic mutants sign up on a Saturday night. And it sucked because you had to pay for parking on the Sunset Strip to sign up for the open mic and then come back on Sunday to see if your number got picked out of a bucket to perform on the following Sunday. So for 3 minutes of stage time, it was a 1, 2, 3 night commitment.
You have to really want it.
If you got lucky enough to be picked. And there was a time where I went through all that, got a spot, and I was so early in the lineup that the only people in the room were the comedians in the back. There was no actual audience yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've done this before.
Yeah, we played to the other bands that were playing the show or whatever.
So you get there and you start working at the Comedy Store, right? Now, who did you come, like, who was your class, so to speak? Did you have any buddies that you ran around with during that? Who were those?
Oh, yeah. Well, first, I was really lucky. It was sort of like divine intervention because I had always heard about the Comedy Store being like, I was more of a comedy nerd than a comedian. So I grew up loving it and reading whatever I could about comedy and comedians, their lives, their process, everything. And then I entered a stand-up comedy contest that was hosted by Pauly Shore in Philly. And I was probably on stage maybe 8-10 times before that my whole life. And Pauly was like, dude, you're funny. You should be in LA. You should be at the Comedy Store. I was like, no fooling. And I thought that was it. I thought that was my Willy Wonka moment. I got the golden ticket. I'm going to get to LA and it's going to be like a movie from that point. That's it. I got my big break. And I had no idea that was just the beginning of the misery. Like I thought that was the end of the line. And I had no idea that was the beginning of the line.
Right.
And when I got to the Comedy Store, I think the first open mic I did was hosted by Bobby Lee. Right. And then the next couple open mics were hosted by Joey Diaz. And then my first Comedy Store friend was Ari Shaffir. And I remember, because he was a door guy and I was just an open micer. And that's like the difference between being on the football team and being a freshman, just showing up like, hey, dudes.
Right.
So I had just gotten a job answering phones at the Comedy Store, which is not as prestigious or as cool of a job as being a door guy. A door guy is
Who calls
like
the Comedy Store? People.
What's that?
Who calls the Comedy Store?
Oh, everybody. It was a weird job. Like it was,
What are they asking you guys? Like what time the show starts, how much tickets are, that kind of thing? Or
I turned that into a bit. Like one of the first bits I wrote because of being at the Comedy Store was like, oh, you're officially a grown up when you have to plan fun. And I'm like, it takes decisions because then I took all the questions I would get as a phone guy. What time's the show start? How much does it cost? Is there a dress code? Where do you park? Do you serve food? Is there any place walking distance to get food? And then you would hear people on the phone. You want to eat before the show? Do you want to eat after the show? What are you in the mood for? Decisions. And then the punchline at the end of that bit, because it made me laugh the first time I heard it. Somebody was like, okay, the show starts at 9. I'm like, that's correct. They're like, doors are open at 8:30. And they're like, okay, what time does the show end? Because it was like so funny to me where they were like, that sounds like fun, but when's this fun going to be over? Like, you know what I mean? So you would get those phone calls, but then you would also get the comedians. And that was awesome. Like being a little comedy nerd. Like, I'm like, oh my God, who's this? Have Mitzi give me a call or this. I remember once we did I was like working as Pauly Shore's assistant, and the club in 2003 was so dead that they couldn't afford to replace the roof on the building. And it was like, I don't know if you guys have ever been there, but it's a big giant building with like 4 stories or something like that.
Right.
And we would have buckets in the showroom because the water was literally leaking through multiple floors of the club. So Pauly reached out to like some of the famous alumni at the Comedy Store. One of them was Robin Williams. Okay. And he had me fax these. This is how long ago it was, almost 20 years ago. He had me fax these letters out to these famous guys. And I faxed one over to Robin Williams. And dude, like within 90 seconds, the phone rings. And I remember Pauly's company was called Landing Patch Productions. And the phone rings and I'm like, Landing Patch Productions, this is Steve. How may I help you? And I hear, oh, thought this was the Comedy Store. I'm like, oh my God, this is Robin Williams. And then he was like, is Pauly there? Could you just let him know it's Robin? And it was like Ghostbusters. I was like, pause. We got one, right? And then Pauly was so excited. He was holding the phone out for me to like nerd out on Robin Williams. And he came back and did a show for us, and it was like legit magical. It was so cool.
That's great. So you were running around with Ari back in the day. Were you both trying to get, I guess you were both the goal with all of you is just to get past and become a paid regular there, right? That's the goal.
Yeah, that's your first goal. It's because like you're not going to develop until you get stage time. And that's like the most valuable commodity to a young comedian is access to a stage.
Yeah.
And then once you get access to a stage, you're like, okay, well now I need better spots. I mean, because every slot over the course of a night teaches you a different lesson. But Ari was the first guy that was like part of my crew. And the first time I met him, I remember because I was like a fan of his. He was like the best door guy with comedy. And I went to college in Baltimore, and Ari was from Maryland. I heard him say that on stage. I'm like, here's my in to make a friend. And I'm answering phones at the Comedy Store, and I'm cool enough to hang out there at night, which was awesome. Just to be there and not have to pay for a ticket and to drink free Diet Cokes. I'm like, this is the best gig ever. Who could ask for anything more? I'm like, this is the best life ever. And Ari was like holding court with all the other door guys. And I'm just like a nerd, like listening to everybody waiting for my chance to talk. And I didn't, like I was too shy to talk. And then like everybody's like, I have to go do stuff, whatever. And it's just me and Ari. And Ari was sitting down because he was the one holding court. Like everybody was standing around Ari on the main room steps into the front of the main room. And it's just me and Ari there. And I'm like, here's my chance. And I go, so you're from Maryland? And Ari went, uh-huh. And he got up and just walked away. He just left me there. He just went, mm-hmm. And he was like, too cool to talk to you, nerd. And then like, I remember within a couple months, like Ari's like, I don't think I'm telling anybody any secrets, but he's like the sweetest guy in the world.
And we've talked to him.
Yeah.
Right? Like he's the best.
You can tell.
I was so poor, and he knew how much I like Chinese food. And there was this really good Chinese food spot. This is Ari's old apartment off of Melrose.
I love your Chinese food story, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And Ari took me to get Chinese food, and I was like, I guess we're officially friends. And the one thing I tell because one of the things I love to do is sort of mentor young comics. It's like my favorite. Ari had something above his bed. I remember literally helping Ari move into his apartment that was a block away from the Comedy Store. And he sort of stayed there until he was famous, or stayed there until he moved to New York. And above Ari's bed, he had a poster board with 100 squares in it, like almost like a calendar, but it was 100 little boxes. And there was a quote above the poster board that said, "You're not a comedian until you bomb 100 times." And then the quote was from Bobby Lee, because Bobby had mentored Ari. Oh. And Bobby said, you can't even call yourself a comedian until you've bombed at least 100 times. So Ari was so dedicated to the craft that literally above his bed, he had a chart with 100 squares with the date and the venue where he bombed. And the coolest thing about it was during the early year of his career, there could be multiple bombs a day.
Oh yeah.
Because he was hitting open mics that hard. Bomb, bomb, bomb. But then over time, the bombs started to become like it would be a bomb every day. And then towards the end of the chart, it was like a 6-month gap in between bombs because he was really becoming a comedian.
Yeah.
That'd be a cool chart to have just to look back at, you know?
If he still has that chart, he should sell it as a poster.
Yeah.
He's been getting his fans to make tour posters for him this year.
That would be a good tour poster.
Yeah,
that'd be a great tour. You know what? I'm going to text him after this.
Yeah, you should tell
him we said hello. So, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So you're working at the Comedy Store, and you talk about, running into Ari and all the comedians that were kind of just above your class, but yeah, I think I heard that it took you forever to get past there, and you worked there forever. So you had to have a ton of those, holy shit, experiences being around the heavyweights that would come through there while you were just working there. if that makes any sense.
Yeah, like it was. Well, the coolest thing I'll say over the whole experience was seeing my friends become famous. Like to me, that's just such a. It's like a love letter to life. Like to see people with their dream put in the hard work and get everything they deserve.
Yeah.
And I remember for years, I would tell people that there was funnier people in my phone than on television. And then something magical happened over 20 years that all the people from my phone became the funniest people. Everybody, the world started to realize what I knew, you know? And yeah, my crew of like door guys at the Comedy Store was like, my real crew was like me, Ari, and Renazizi. And Renazizi was the first one to blow up. And that was weird because I thought he wasn't going to be my friend anymore because I had heard all this stuff about people turning Hollywood. And I'm like, oh, Renazizi got on Punk'd. I guess we're not going to be friends anymore. And we were still friends. I'm like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And to see that, and then Renazizi was so good to me. Like, he let me live rent free in his condo for like 2 years when I was like right when I needed it. And then to see guys like Sebastian go from like late night spots in the original room to selling out Madison Square Garden for like a week straight was incredible. And then to see comedians I grew up with sort of pop in and like put in the work. Like I remember seeing George Carlin used to work out his specials at the Comedy Store before he did anything else. Like he would literally come out on stage for a month in the main room with a stack of note cards. And everybody knew he would, you know, adjust the audience expectations that this was just part of Carlin's process. What he would do is I know it would start at the Comedy Store for sure. And then I think he would go to Vegas once it was sort of getting there and then hammer it out in Vegas, then take it on the road, then film it for HBO. And I saw him start 2 of his last specials at the Comedy Store. And that was incredible.
That's cool.
Yeah, to see Carlin work it out. And then I remember seeing Chris Rock the first year he hosted the Oscars with his whole team of comedy writers in the back. And then that they were the years at the Comedy Store when nobody was coming in there. So Chris would really, really experiment. Like he would even repeat because there was only 8 people in the audience. Mm-hmm. So he'd be like, wait, is it funnier if I say it like this? Or is it funnier if I say it like this? And then other times he would say the joke and stop himself and then start it over again just so he could hear it out loud. And then sometimes he'd be like yelling to the back for suggestions. And it was great. It was great to see guys and their process, you know?
Yeah.
So while you're working there, does that afford you, do they give you stage time just for working there? Or do you have to work your way up?
You would get the bonus, like what you really got paid for being a door guy, because my first couple of years of working there, they actually found out like it was totally not cool. They would pay us $25 a shift. So on Sundays was the open mic night. So I'd get there around 6 o'clock and stay at 2 a.m. So it was like 8 hours of work for $25. Yeah. But what you really got paid in was the 3-minute stage time. So you didn't have to sign up for the open mic. So the open mic night would start with 20 open micers, and then it was door guys. And then it morphed into this thing called Friends and Family, which essentially what were like comedians that used to be door guys and got sick of it, or people that were showcasing for Mitzi. And then it would go into the comedians that would just sign up for a spot that night. Cause it wasn't a booked night. It was a pop-in night.
Wow. So how many years did you do this before you got passed?
8.
Wow. That is a grind.
And then it was Mitzi who would pass everyone. She's the one who decided.
Yeah. And I was Mitzi's assistant. So there were literally nights where like I would drive Mitzi in like this Comedy Store van. And there were times like, I'm very objective. There were times I bombed in front of Mitzi. And there were times because I would get so nervous, it meant too much to me. It was like talking to a girl you like versus like, who cares? Like Tommy Boy and Wings. Remember, like, who cares if I get the wings? It's just, I cared too much at times. But then there were times where I killed it, right? killed it, caught magic. Like, I don't know if I've ever been that funny since. And this was Mitzi's process, okay? She'd sit in the back of the room. She had Mitzi's seat. And she had a little piece of paper printed out with all the comedians that were showcasing for her. And if you got passed, she circled your name. If she didn't pass you, she scratched it out, okay? And I remember one time there was a great comedian actually from El Paso. His name was Freddy Soto. He's one of the most talented, best comics I've ever seen. And
he's kind of a legend, right?
Yeah. Yeah, man. He was the real deal. And like such a sweet, kind person, you know, more than anything. I miss him dearly. And he was like a big brother to me, Ari Renazizi. Like he was the guy. But one night he was hosting and Mitzi came in to watch us. And I was showcasing for Mitzi. And at the time I was Pauly Shore's opening act. So I didn't have any jokes because Pauly was like selling out wherever we went. And it was kind of like that still like 90s rocker type crowd. Yeah. So I would just go out on stage like I was an 80s heavy metal singer and I'd be like, "What's up, Cleveland? Let me see your cigarette lighters." And would murder in front of Pauly's crowd because it's like Saturday night energy and I'm just being a goofball. And I would sort of like had some more observational. It was before I was really telling stories on stage. And I remember Freddie was hosting and Mitzi was going to show. There was like 4 people. I knew I was supposed to showcase for Mitzi, but she used to like to stay in on Sunday nights and watch Sex and the City. So we all knew that she probably would never show up. So we're like, she's not going to show up. She shows up and there's 4 people in the audience. And I'm like, well, how are we going to do showcases with 4 people? Like, what are you going to do with 4 people? Like, how? That's not a performance. Like, and then they're like, no, she's coming in. And they sit Mitzi in her chair and Freddie's going up and doing his thing. I'm like, what do I do? Like, what material? Like, huh? And I remember I just gave myself the worst advice. I was like, just do what you do, dog. Go for it. And there's 4 people in the audience. I walk out on stage and I go, "What's up, Los Angeles? Let me see your cigarette lighters." And it was so quiet in the room that I could hear Mitzi scratching my name off the list. Just going. So I had to stay up there for another 3 minutes. But then there were times where like, I know I killed it and I would like try to get it, see if my name was circled. And there were a couple of times where I'd look down, not only was my name circled, because I showcased for her like 30 times. There were times where she put stars around my name. Like everybody else's name would be scratched out. Mine was circled with 3 stars. And I'm like, no way. I don't know about Mitzi, but I know stars were always good. And then there was one time I saw the stars and I'm driving Mitzi home and I'm like, I wonder why she hasn't told me I know I killed. Everybody in that room knows I killed. I saw a glimpse at her paper and not only was it circled, but there were stars on there. So I'm like driving Mitzi home and I'm like, so, see anybody you like tonight? Like I'm trying to make it easier for her to give me the good news. And she was like, wouldn't you like to know? But she did it just to make me tougher.
So this went on for 8 years.
Yeah.
How did you, when you find, so I assume that maybe Ari and Steve got passed before you. Were you the last of the 3? Was that weird? I mean, I'm sure you weren't mad that they made it, but did it affect your confidence at all? I'm sure you were happy for them, but did you think, well, we started together, why am I not? Or were you delusional like I am when you told no? You're like, well, it's their fault. They just don't know yet.
I'm trying to get back into that mindset. I remember, or like probably I've been doing comedy for like 2 years. And it was Joe Rogan that like, he was like the sheriff of the Comedy Store, right? Even before his podcast or anything. Like Earl, like, I don't even know if Joe was doing Fear Factor yet, but he was still like respected as the sheriff of the Comedy Store, not just because he was a great comic, but everybody knew Joe could kick your ass. So it was like so he was the alpha even then. And I remember he told me once that fame comes to you in stages, and it has to, or else you would lose your mind. And I remember he was like, see, he goes, the first stage is that you become friends with somebody that's famous. He was like, see, right now we're talking. He goes, it's not weird, right? And he goes, because I'm just Joe to you. But he was like, I was in Florida this weekend and people were following me and Joey Diaz through a mall. That is weird. They were like, there's the fear factor guy. And they didn't. So he said, first you become friends with somebody that's famous. Then one of your friends becomes famous. He was like, and then you become famous. But it's such a gradual thing. You don't even think about it, because by the time, I remember he's like such a smart dude, but he was like, by the time you get, at the time Tonight Show was still a career milestone. Right. He's like, by the time you get to do the Tonight Show, it's not going to seem like a big deal to you, because some of your friends that you started with are already going to be movie stars. So you're going to be like, oh, it's just the Tonight Show. I need to get to the next thing and to the next thing. So when my friends started to get past, like, I was just so happy for them. But then I think there was years where I was also just so stuck in survival mode. I was just trying to eat and pay my rent that I don't even, like, those years were so awesome and so terrible that I don't know, man. Like, the truth was I moved to LA because I wanted to write and work in like I wanted to be like a writer, producer guy that always loved stand-up. But I started to do stand-up just because it was there was no procrastination. Right. Like, they say your name, you got to go do something.
Well, how was talking about just wanting to be a writer? I know you probably did the road a bunch, so you weren't even thinking in terms of what it takes to go out on the road. I mean, we know what a brutal run physically and mentally that can do to you, especially early. So how did you deal with that when you first took off?
Dude, I don't know how. I think it's all the grace of God. Like, I don't know how any of it happened, right? Like, I remember driving to LA. I had Pauly Shore's road manager's phone number written on a piece of paper. I got a job right away in a pizza place because the guy knew somebody I knew that he played baseball with one of my friend's brothers or something, and I had to eat. And I remember that was like a survival technique, one of my, like, from college, where it's like, oh, if you work at a place that sells food, you're never going to starve. So I got a job at a pizza place, and then I'm up doing PA work for Pauly Shore on the set of an independent movie. And I remember it was 3:00 in the morning. I'm carrying a couch down a flight of steps because nobody else wanted to work. And Pauly saw me. And he called me at 4:30 in the morning when everybody, and he was like, dude, I'm going to get you a job at the Comedy Store. Thank you for all of your help. And that was music to my ears, because that meant I didn't have to go through the open mic process anymore. So then it was just from that, covering shifts at the Comedy Store, working in pizza places, doing telemarketing. Oh, wait, some of my friends are starting to make it. That's awesome. Oh, wait, now I'm on the road and I'm getting paid to do comedy. Then I finally get passed at the Comedy Store and they put me in the main room so I can quit one of my day jobs, because I made as much money. And back when the main room wasn't getting anybody in there, they would still split the door with you. And I remember I could make like $120 or $130 in one show. And that's like 30 hours a week at minimum wage when they take taxes out. So I remember begging the talent coordinator, like, dude, please, I don't care if you put me up at the end of the night. If you give me a spot on Saturday nights, I can quit one of my day jobs, please. And I was just grateful for that. And it was awesome to see my friends start to make it, because then I could start to go out on the road with them.
I didn't think about that.
Right? Like, that's the best. Then you're like, I can't believe I get paid for this. I'm hanging out with my buddies and I get paid. That was the coolest thing ever.
So at what point did you meet Dice in all this? Were you still just managing the club? Was it?
Yeah, before. I mean, it was early. And like, that was one of my guys, man. Like,
it has to be a trip, because we talked to Jim Florentine about the same way, and I'm about the same age, and we all saw him on that same special. So it wasn't too far removed from that special that you're meeting him. So it must have been just a weird, and he was huge.
Huge. I saw him at the Philadelphia Spectrum, and my seats were so far away from the stage, I could literally touch the rafters.
Wow.
That's not an exaggeration. And then I guess it was 12 years after that, I was in his backyard for a Sunday barbecue, and he's just a dad, and he's like, Stevie, you want cheese on your burger? I'm like, yes, please. Like, it was surreal. Like, I used to babysit his kids. And that I think was the most interesting thing about our friendship, because I didn't really become friends with Dice. I became friends with Andrew, like the guy behind the persona. And I think it was just, I think you hear all these awful things about entertainment and show business, but like, I'm a pretty nice guy. And I think the only reason anybody ever helped me is because I was nice, because they were too. Does that make sense?
Yeah, they recognized it in another person and like, oh, you're actually one of us, regardless.
Yeah.
Yeah, light attracts light, you know.
So how did you meet him? Did just when he working at the club? What did you know? I'm sure you were a bit shy. Did you go up and go, "Hey, Di," you know?
This is what happened. Okay, this is what I remember. Okay, so when I had I'm working at this pizza place, and one of the guys in the pizza place, like, you know, Dice works out at Gold's in Venice. I was like, no way. So then I went and got a gym membership there, and then I was working at the Comedy Store, and you would hear stories about Andrew popping in and stuff, doing late night spots. And then there was a door guy, the guy that used to run the Comedy Store parking lot was this gentleman by the name of Chewy Castro, that was also a blues musician. And like twice a year, Chewy would go play the House of Blues. And the whole Comedy Store family would go support Chewy across the street at the House of Blues. And I was already managing the club, and Dice was hanging out with this guy named Wheels, his buddy, his sidekick. And I used to wear like an Andrew Dice Clay t-shirt underneath whatever shirt I was going to wear when I was doing open mic comedy. Like early on, it was like I'd wear like a Dice shirt with like a Hawaiian shirt over it. It was like my comedy uniform. Like,
yeah,
here we go. It's time to be funny. And I went to go see Chewy play at the House of Blues, and I happened to be wearing like a 12, 13-year-old Dice t-shirt. And I see Dice, and I'm like, hey, Dice, man. And he was like, is that the kid from the store? Like, he didn't even know what was going on. That was the first thing I said. And then he started to hang out with me in the manager's office of the Comedy Store. Like, I guess like feeling me out a little bit to see whatever. And then we started to work out together. There was like this famous like little hiking trail in Hollywood called Runyon Canyon. And Dice would be like, I'll pick you up tomorrow in the Bulldog. He had an old Bronco he'd call the Bulldog. And I was living in this terrible apartment at the time. It was like a tiny little Section 8 apartment because my roommate had cerebral palsy. So he had really cheap rent. So he let me live there for $250. And Dice would pick me up. We would do Runyon Canyon, then go lift weights. It was the craziest.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Oh, here's an insane Dice story about.
Yes.
Okay. So it's like about 20 years ago. I think it was the summer of 2001. And like, he's my best friend. Like, we're hanging out at the Comedy Store at night and working out during the day. And his sense of humor is like very childlike. Like, he loves like just having fun, like for a goof. And he's also does stuff like he was like sometimes like a bad influence. Like, I'm pretty much like a very sheltered, naive, like sweet guy that's like, I'm just going to go to church and try to help old people. So Dice used to he wanted to run around the track at Hollywood High School, but it was closed. And I'm like, well, we can't do it. It's closed. He's like, let's hop the fence. I'm like, I'm not hopping the fence, Andrew. It's closed to the public. He's like, come on. So he hops over the fence, and I'm like, I shouldn't be doing this. And then I hop over the fence, and I look around, and he's gone. I'm like, what is going on here? And in the 30 seconds I couldn't find him, it dawns on me that I must have invented my friendship with Andrew Dice Clay Fight Club stuff. Like, I've gotten so crazy that I really thought I was interacting with Andrew Dice Clay. But I never met him. None of this is real. These are all the thoughts going through my head. And then I just hear, your face, what are you thinking? And he came out of the bushes and hugged me. He goes, I wish I had that recorded.
That's
Like hanging out with a 12-year-old.
He seems like such a silly guy to all these stories outside of Dice that you hear of other comedians talking.
Yeah,
and
just
a really nice guy too.
Yeah, he's a
just funny because funny thing about comedians, it doesn't matter what kind of humor they do, because your act and Ari's act and Dice's act, if you were just judging that, you're like, well, surely they're not friends. They don't do anything like that.
Similar, yeah.
But again, talking to you guys outside of that, you can see why the circles that there are. You can see why, because there's a sameness and a down to earthness, no matter how big or small there is.
And I credit the Comedy Store to that 1,000%. Like, the Comedy Store breeds this type of, you have to be real, dude, or you're just not gonna.
Genuine.
That Hollywood stuff doesn't work there. Be genuine, be who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And that was Mitzi's philosophy on comedy. And that really ripples through the whole club and the culture of the club. It's the best friends I've ever met. Like, Renazizi and Ari are like my war buddies. Like, when you go through poverty and open mics together, it's a blessing, the bond.
I can imagine.
Good times do not form bonds the way that bad times do.
Yeah.
Well, it's like when we were talking to Doug Stanhope, he was like, you can only have your greatest gig one time, and everything else, and nobody wants to hear that story. All of the good stories are the bombs.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to hear, I went out and I crushed it that night. The greatest stories are the bombs. And that's what you guys share, that you come up with. I'm sure that's the ones you're talking about, not when you were killing it.
No, yeah, it's the best. There's not, it's like, I don't know.
And all of you guys are so cool. I haven't talked to all of you yet, but all of you are just so cool. I can't believe how cool you are. And the ones with the darkest humor seem to be the sweetest, like you said, before.
There's so many.
Okay, only one more question, then I'm going to let you go.
We got to get one more out.
Okay.
We still haven't found out how did it go when you got passed? Like, was there a ceremony when you finally get passed?
What was it? You didn't say.
How did that go down?
Oh, that's another Ari story.
Oh, perfect.
Oh,
We'll end on the Ari story.
Oh, yeah. So it was spring of 2008. I'd been hanging out at the club for probably almost 8 years, And at the time, the talent coordinator was this guy, Tommy, who, ask anybody that was at the Comedy Store for the early 2000s, they all have Tommy stories. And I was on the road a bunch because my roommate at the time was another buddy of mine from Texas, this kid, Steve Trevino, who's awesome. So great that he's selling out everything now. And it's awesome to see. But at the time, we were not living like that. But I was his opening act. I was on the road a bunch. I was doing a lot of shows for the military. So I was on the road all the time. And I hadn't seen Ari in a while. And we were at a coffee shop in Hollywood. And the phone rings. And it's the talent coordinator from the Comedy Store, this guy, Tommy. And he goes, Steve, it's Tommy. Mitzi wants to know if you want to showcase Sunday night for her. And I just told Ari I was over it. I don't care anymore. And I can't just be like, oh yeah, please give me a showcase after I just told Ari I didn't care.
Was Ari right there in the room with you?
Literally, we're outside at a table and I'm like, dude, I'm sick of it. I don't care anymore. And it was like, I just made my peace. And Ari's like, I get it, dude. And the phone rings and it says the Comedy Store. And he's like, oh, you should get it. So I tell Tommy, I go, no, I'm not going to showcase for Mitzi. And Ari's like this. Like, I really did it, And then Tommy's like, well, why don't you want to showcase for Mitzi? I'm like, because she's seen me 30 times, 40 times. Like, what's going to be different this? I go, I don't need it. I'm sorry. And he was like, well, if Jamie Masada at the Laugh Factory called you, would you showcase for Jamie? I go, absolutely. And he was like, why would you showcase for Jamie and not Mitzi? I'm like, well, let's start with Jamie's never seen me perform, Tommy. Mitzi's seen me 30 times. I never parked cars for Jamie. I never made drinks for Jamie. I never answered phones for Jamie. I never ran Jamie's club. I never worked the door at Jamie's club. I never got Jamie out of bed in the morning. I never put Jamie in bed at night. I go, I'm over it. I go, the Comedy Store right now is the chick that I've been in love with, and she keeps on dating jerks, and I'm her friend, and now I don't want to be her friend anymore. And he was like, well, I'm sorry you feel that way. I go, I'm sorry I feel this way. Put in so much work. Don't you want to see it pay off? I go, I don't care, dude. I don't care. I'm headlining the Improv this weekend. Have fun. Enjoy your club. Click. And Ari was like, whoa.
I was just about to say, knowing Ari just a tiny bit from the podcast, he had to be loving that speech.
He loved it, but he was also like, you had to do it. Like,
Right.
if I didn't have that pre-talk with Ari, it's like, dude, it worked out like a movie. Like that, we were talking about it. Then the phone randomly rings.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I can't believe I just told the Comedy Store I don't want to be a paid regular. And then we're talking about it, and the phone rings like 3 minutes later, 4 minutes later. And it's the Comedy Store then. Steve, it's Tommy. I go, yeah, what do you want, dude? He goes, I just got off the phone with Mitzi. Congratulations, you're our newest paid regular. I was like, what? That's all it took? Was standing up for myself. And then I had a great conversation with Mitzi a few years later. And she started explaining some things to me. But she was the first person to show me tough love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, do you think it was just you standing up at that point in time, or do you think if you would have had that opportunity and stood up 4 years earlier, or was she just, was it just,
Yeah, I wasn't such a baby. I think she was concerned that the business was going to destroy me because I was too nice.
so she was just waiting to just beat you, to toughen you up? And
100% so.
And I've heard stories like that. She seemed to be, whether right or wrong, have a really definitive plan for comics and the store and how everything was going to work and what it, bringing joy through comics to other people.
Dude, 6 months before 9/11, it was March of 2001. It was my first night at the Comedy Store as a manager. So Mitzi walked me through the club and showed me everything the way she wanted it. And then we sat in her booth to watch a show in the main room called Arabian Nights, which was primarily for Muslim comedians, 6 months before 9/11. And I'm in Mitzi's booth and she's telling me how God talks to her and how the Comedy Store is protected and how important humor is. And she was like, that's why I put together this show. She goes, it's a big deal for a Jewish woman to give Muslims a platform to develop their craft. She's like, I'm doing it because God wants me to do it. And she was like, I need to develop these guys because things are going to get a lot worse. God told me things are going to get a lot worse. And I need to develop Muslim comics so we can create laughter and dialogue.
I have goosebumps.
She told me that 6 months before 9/11.
Holy shit.
What a story.
Yeah, it's real. She was touched.
That's so cool.
Yep.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it might have taken 8 years, but man, it seems to have been worth it. It seems to be
Honestly,
worth it,
like what I tell people is I go, the 8 years was going to go by anyway. 20 years. Like I haven't made it yet, but I'm so grateful that like I never had to sell my soul, that I make a living doing what I love. And I've met the coolest people in the world along my ride. My journey's been so cool.
Yeah.
Wasn't there that guy in the Bible, Boaz, who had to wait 8 years for his wife he wanted or something? Or I don't know if I have the names right. But
Dude,
I feel like,
I don't know.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm not smart enough, but I know. I don't know, man. It's just cool. Like I think like whenever you get put to the test, like suffering can either make you more compassionate
Yeah.
or make you like it.
Bitter.
Yeah. And I'm like, I'm glad I sort of learned that lesson that it's just better to be cool,
Me too. I'm glad I know you, Steve. Thanks for doing this with us.
All right,
Yeah,
guys. It's so cool. Thank you so much.
It's fun. Hopefully next time you come through Nashville, look us up. You're closer now.
Yeah, dude.
And we play
Yeah, I have a lot
all
of
the time.
friends there now. So I can see you guys. I could see Byrne. I could see Theo. It'll be fun.
Yeah.
Right up
cool.
the road. You got a spot to play or just stay when you come, man.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you guys. God bless you guys. Thank
Nice
you.
to meet you, buddy.
See ya.
Take care.
Steve Simeone is my favorite comedian.
Here's another one of those ridiculous and unnecessary outros, ladies and gentlemen. Rate, subscribe, review, all of that nonsense.
Tell your friends.
I know your mom's name.
Enjoy your groceries. Free Britney. Don't be an asshole. Nailed it.
Nailed it.